That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Or was it a giant leap for our imaginations? Did man actually step foot on the moon? Or was it all a hoax to beat Russia? Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm your host, Dani Mercy, and today we're talking about the moon landing. Was it real? Follow me down this rabbit hole to find out. On May 25th, 1961, President John F. Kennedy, announced to the joint session of Congress that he wanted to land man on the moon. And of course, on September 12th, 1962, his famous speech, "We choose to go to the moon," he decided that we would land man on the moon by the end of the decade. And on July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong and Edwin Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon. So we did it. In the decade, 8 years since the dedication from the president to the actual man landing on the moon, we set foot on the moon. But did we actually step foot on the moon? So the government allocated $25 billion towards NASA, which is $100 billion today, 4.4% of the national budget for 1966. So if we did actually fail to go to the moon, could you imagine the chaos because of the amount of money that we allocated towards NASA and the fact that we wanted to beat Russia that would ensue because our people wanted to go to the moon? We sent up 6 crews, Apollo 11, 12, 13 did not go up. They had to return to Earth due to malfunctions. The crew did survive. 14, 15, 16, and 17. So we did send up, supposedly, 6 crews to the moon. Multiple astronauts walked on the moon, but was it all just a hoax? So let's talk about the space race a little bit, because at the time we were in the Cold War with Russia, so we were both racing to get to space first, and Russia, by all accounts, was winning. So Russia had the first artificial satellite in space, the first mammal to go into orbit around Earth. They landed first on the moon, not humans, but they had the first hard landing on the moon. The U.S. did have the first solar-powered satellite and the first photograph of Earth from orbit. So we were beating Russia there, but this was all in the 1959. 1957 was when they put the dog into Earth's orbit. In 1960, Russia had returned animals and plants safely and alive from space. Meaning that their first dog that they put into space did not return alive. The U.S. had the first pilot-controlled space flight, so that was astronaut Alan Shepard on 1961. However, Russia, in 1961 as well, just a couple months later, had the first crewed mission lasting a full day around Earth's orbit. And then the first dual-crewed space flight. 1963, Russia had the first woman in space and the first civilian in space. So we were going back and forth quite a bit with Russia. We needed anything to win. 1966, Russia had the first soft landing on the moon and the first photos from the moon. And in 1966, just a month later, they had the first hard landing on another planet, Venus. And then we get into us going out of Earth's orbit. So if you believe what is put out by NASA, according to the normies, they believe that Apollo 8 orbited the moon. Up until this point, no manned aircraft or spacecraft had left Earth's orbit until Apollo 8 orbited the moon and returned home. And Neil Armstrong was on that flight. He was not the commander, but he was the second in charge, basically. So before we get into all that and how leaving Earth's orbit can't really be a thing, we have to talk about Bart Sibrel. So who is Bart Sibrel? Bart Sibrel is the most well-known moon landing conspiracist. So he's made the movie, he's a filmmaker. He made the movie A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. He has another, like a follow-up, Astronauts Gone Wild. He actually, most of my research came from a book that he authored called The Moon Man. And in this book, he claims that he has solid evidence that we did not go to the moon because he has a source, the chief security officer from the base where this moon landing was filmed. He also has other sources. Bill Casing was a contractor with NASA for multiple years, and he worked on the Apollo missions, and he's a source for Bart Sibrel, a whistleblower, you would say. So we need to get into some of the things that Bart Sibrel brings up and some of the other things that are said about this moon landing and why it cannot be real. On the outside of Earth's atmosphere, of Earth's orbit, there are radiation belts. There are two, with a third one being intermittent, kind of comes and goes. And these radiation belts are said to be extremely harmful. Even the astronauts that have orbited Earth, that have been up in outer space, they've been known to come home with extremely high amounts of radiation and been exposed to radiation. Of course, they can't take lead up in their spacecraft because it would just be too heavy. And so they just get exposed to all this radiation from the radiation belts. The International Space Station orbits 370 miles lower than the radiation belts, and those astronauts have been exposed to extreme amounts of radiation from the radiation belts. In 2016, NASA claimed that we didn't actually have the technology to go through the radiation belts safely. But if that's the case in 2016, how did we have the technology to go through these radiation belts in the 60s and 70s when we orbited the moon and then landed on the moon multiple times, right? If we could go through the radiation belts then, how come we can't just use that exact same technology and go through the radiation belts now? And then let's talk about the videos and the pictures that you're seeing of these astronauts. So there is a famous video of the astronauts halfway to the moon. This is Apollo 11, halfway to the moon, where they have this tiny little Earth that you can see. So Bart Sibrel, in one of the YouTubes that I watched of a interview with him, he is explaining and he shows this video. So please go, it's in our show notes, you can see all the sources. It's the second YouTube video on our sources. You can see with Valuetainment is this interview, and he's showing the different videos. Also, if you go to Sibrel.com, you can see the different videos that he is showing. So one of these videos he got from a source. It's an unedited version of what they showed on TV. You can see the Earth. It's super, super tiny. At the time where they were at, if they were in Earth's orbit, to make the Earth look that small, they had to have the camera all the way back against the wall, like the back wall. So they were looking at the window from a far away vantage point. The camera, it's 1960s, right? So the camera is huge and it takes up the entire window. So in his unedited version of this video, of this camera footage of the Earth being tiny, like they were halfway to the moon, you can see that there's lights from like workstation lights. You can see, if you look, you have to look really closely, you can see the astronauts' reflection in the window. You can see different things on the outside of where they say that this camera is all the way up in the window, but you can see that they have the camera pulled back, and they're looking at the moon or at the Earth from a very tiny little perspective. They also have pictures of the Earth being regular size, as if we were in Earth's orbit. And at that time, they had the camera pushed all the way up into the window, so that way they can get a really good picture of the Earth. You can also, on this video, or on a video that Sibrel shows in his documentary and in the interviews, you hear this back and forth from Houston talking to, and it's kind of grainy, they're talking to Armstrong in the spacecraft. And if they really were on the moon or very close to the moon or on their way to the moon, there would be a 4-second delay. In the video that Sibrel shows, there's the Houston talks, and then there's a 4-second delay, and then you hear this voice and it says talk, and it's very clear. And then you hear Armstrong come back and repeat, like, yes, like the video looks good, or whatever they were talking about. So why would there have to be like a third party when this is supposed to be a secure line, right? This is NASA. This is supposed to be very secure. Why is there a third party saying talk on this video?
Did you know that over 40% of Americans have a hard time swallowing pills? So when it's time to take your vitamins, large capsules and pills are out of the question. We know that gummy vitamins exist, but they're full of sugar, they get stuck in your teeth, and they only contain a fraction of the nutrients you need. Luckily, Easy Melts has discovered the ultimate vitamin sweet spot. Vitamins that melt in your mouth, taste like a treat, and are packed with nutrients ready for absorption, all without an ounce of sugar. For a limited time, Easy Melts is giving listeners a free 3-month supply of vitamin D3 with their first purchase. To claim your free D3 vitamins, visit try.easymelts.com/spring24. That's try.melts.com/spring24. Say goodbye to the old way of taking your vitamins and say hello to the easy way. Menopausal and perimenopausal women, listen up. It's time to take control of your health and comfort, and Winona is here to help. Winona is a telemedicine company for menopause care who believes that your symptoms are real, important, and deserve to be taken seriously. And for many women, this starts with hormone replacement therapy. Winona's HRT is made with plant-based, bioidentical hormones rather than synthetic ones, so it better aligns with your body to offer relief from hot flashes, weight gain, and other uncomfortable symptoms. 80% of women who use Winona find relief within just 90 days. So, what are you waiting for? Get started today. Visit buywinona.com today to start your free visit. With free shipping and the ability to pause or cancel at any time, your path to wellness has zero obligations. Use code SPRING24 at buywinona.com for 25% off your first treatment plan. That's BYWINONA.com for 25% off. Winona. Menopause care made easy.
So during my research, I found what some other people also believe as a conspiracy theory. A lot of people say that this was filmed in a secret location, which I do believe it was filmed in a secret location. But people say that it was filmed either in Hollywood Hills, Area 51, some secret location, like a secret place. Bart Sibrel, in his book Moon Man, has a chief security officer as one of his sources, who is now since passed away. He was a chief security officer in Air Force, kind of in charge of the military police, saying that they did the initial filming and the start of the films on Cannon Air Force Base in New Mexico. And they used this location because it's really small. Really, it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, so it's thought to not have many eyewitnesses. And it was codenamed Project Slam Dunk. And the first 3 days of filming, and this filming started in 1968, were overseen by the president himself, President Lyndon B. Johnson at the time. So that's from Bart Sibrel's source. Of course, other people say, a secret location, Hollywood Hills, Area 51. Of course, it's whatever you believe. So let's talk about the gravity that we see in the videos. So when they're actually on the moon, and we have those videos of them like playing on the moon, doing different things, putting the flag on the moon. So everyone keeps saying, well, the normies say, well, the gravity, how come they can't fake the low gravity? Well, if they do small jumps, because they weren't jumping high, they were only jumping a few inches off the ground. So if they do like jumps like that while they're walking, and then if it's you can easily slow a film down to see those jumps in slow motion. It would look like how they're jumping in the video that we see. Also, you see Buzz Aldrin planting the U.S. flag on the Earth's or on the moon's surface. there's a lot of controversy about this back and forth. So when he's planting it and he's putting the flag down, he's kind of shaking it back and forth to really get it secure and set in where it's at. So when he's shaking it back and forth, of course, the flag is going back and forth. And if you didn't know this about the flag, so it has a pole going up to hold the back side of the flag, but it also has a pole going across the top to hold the flag out. But after Aldrin stops securing the flag keeps moving. It's not drastic, it's only a little bit, but it does keep waving a little bit. And many say that this is due to the AC in the hangar, wherever this was filmed, versus like wind, because there is no wind on the moon. Like there's no wind up there. So how does this flag keep waving after he's done? And it's very slight. It's a slight movement, but it still waves. Another thing to note is that there's only one light source on the moon. It's the sun. So when the sun is coming down, and you can see this perfectly on Earth's surface, when the sun's coming down, shadows should be parallel to each other. They should not be running in different directions. They should all be going in the same direction because the sun is coming from one direction down onto that surface. Like I said, you can see that easily. You go outside, you look at a bunch of trees, their shadows are going parallel to each other. In several of the pictures, you have to look kind of closely at the shadows of the different things. You can see, and Bart Sibrel shows this in a lot of his videos, also on his website, like I shared earlier, Sibrel.com. You can see these pictures of astronauts and their shadows going one direction, and there's a little rock, and like the rock's shadow is going in a completely different direction, like 90 degrees differently. And yes, I've seen shadows on Earth be a little bit different depending on, other lights could be a source, but also like wind and different things can cause shadows to go a little bit differently. So if the shadows were going like just a little bit, not fully parallel, I could understand it. But these shadows are going 90 degrees in different directions. And everyone's like, oh, it's just from the sun. It's just from the sun. Well, if it's just from the sun, how come they're going in different directions? Sibrel claims that it's electrical lighting from a studio, and many people believe this. You have the flag waving when there's no wind on the moon. You have these shadows going in different directions. This can't happen if this wasn't filmed in a studio or in a secret location somewhere. Sibrel says in that location in New Mexico, like I said, other people believe maybe like a secret location, Hollywood Hills or Area 51, but you can't create that if it's just the sun coming down to cast these shadows. These shadows are coming from multiple different lights, coming in different directions. And let's go ahead and tackle another really big debunking theory, right? So NASA had 400,000 people throughout the time of this space race working to get our men on the moon, to get us up there to beat Russia. Well, so here's the debunking theory. If you have that many people working on this space race, then how do you keep 400,000 people quiet if the moon landing was fake? Well, they didn't have to keep 400,000 people quiet. They had to keep only a few people quiet because those people were also tricked. NASA employees were also tricked. They actually worked on something really important, something to get us up into Earth's orbit. We definitely went into Earth's orbit. We launched a lot of really good things, but did we actually land on the moon? And these people, I'm sure they would never want to actually believe, no, we didn't land on the moon, because they were there working on it. But let's backtrack here a little bit. NASA's administrator, James Webb, resigned literally just days before the Apollo 8 launch to the moon. So he had worked at NASA from 1961, and just days before the Apollo 8 launch. Apollo 8 launched December 21st, 1968. So 8 years he has been working at NASA as the administrator, and then all of a sudden he just resigns. He's just gone. So if you've been working to get our men on the moon to be the first people to walk on the moon or be in charge of the mission as the NASA administrator, why would you just resign days before we actually launch to get up into outer space, to go to the moon? And yes, Apollo 8, didn't actually land on the moon. Apollo 8 just like returned to Earth after orbiting the moon. So they didn't actually land there. But I don't know, it's just weird. So the theory is only like less than 100 people actually knew it was fake. So you had like the president and the president's staff. So Lyndon B. Johnson, he had to make sure that we went to the moon in the timeline, the naive timeline set by President JFK before he was assassinated, right? And Lyndon Johnson took over and was like, okay, he made this statement, so we're definitely going to have to go to the moon by the end of the decade. And they did. Ideally, they did, in quotes, right? So the president, Lyndon B. Johnson, he knew. He had some staff members that knew. Obviously, the astronauts knew that it was fake. And a few people at NASA knew it was fake as well, but not that many. So you have to have some, NASA people, higher ups, because otherwise, you can't make a fake moon landing, right? So, and then also a good thing to note for the 400,000 people that were working at NASA. So everyone worked in their own departments, right? And you would get pretty good and really comfortable in your field or in your department. And then as soon as you were kind of like starting to get the hang of things, then they'd switch you to other departments. And this was known to happen around NASA all the time. They were constantly switching people between departments, because if you got too good or you knew things too well, then you might be able to figure out that we weren't actually going to the moon, that we were going to fake it. Let's talk about another couple big things. So you have 3 astronauts that were on the Apollo 11 mission, right? So you have Aldrin, Armstrong, and Collins. Collins stayed on the spacecraft because, you have to have one astronaut to stay there to make sure, the other 2 can get back to the ship. So Armstrong and Aldrin went, and they actually walked on the moon. You see Aldrin planting this flag, right? In Armstrong's famous words. And they all go to the moon. When they come back and they're doing a press conference, they look miserable. Like they just they're at a funeral. They're just so upset. But why? If you were the first people to just walk on the moon, nobody else has accomplished this, why are you upset? Shouldn't you be really excited and happy, like ecstatic? You did something literally nobody else in the world has ever done before, and you're the absolute first people to walk on the moon, and all of a sudden you're sad, you're upset. I guess I could understand like wanting to go back, but not being like mad or sad or looking like you're at a funeral. So these 3 astronauts, of the 3, Buzz Aldrin gives the most interviews. He's pretty outspoken about, going to the moon, and he talks a lot about it. But Armstrong and Collins they don't really do interviews. They hardly ever talk about it to anybody. Armstrong lived in a neighborhood, and most of his neighbors didn't even know who he was, or that he was even living there. So he was really trying to stay out of the limelight after this. And I could kind of understand that. If you're really famous, you want to kind of like take a step back. Okay. But Collins and Armstrong really only came out to talk about, the moon landing every like 10-year anniversary, 5-year anniversary, something like that. So that way, they didn't get caught too much in the lies, and maybe Buzz was like the best liar, saying, yeah, we went to the moon, blah, 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 right? A couple other really big things to note. So these are all like the biggest things. So Aldrin gives all the interviews, right? Armstrong, Collins really keep quiet, don't really talk about anything ever. And then NASA, after they've decided, you know what, we're no longer going to go to the moon, we're just going to be done now, all the Apollo ships were completely destroyed, blueprints completely destroyed, everything gone. Everything from these missions just destroyed, erased. I don't understand. Why would you just erase all of that? And right now, you've got Elon Musk trying to go to Mars, and he's dealing with some different things that NASA probably had to deal with back in the 60s when we went to the moon, and they're not there's no blueprints, there's no way to look back and be like, okay, this is how they did it. Maybe we can expand upon that a little bit. Why haven't we been back to the moon in 50 plus years? Why haven't we been back? So when people started coming to America, when America was first discovered, you had explorers come over, and then you had more explorers come over, then you had colonies come over, or like people to build colonies come over, and more people, and now, still today, people are still coming to America, the promised land, for this idea of like a greater civilization. So why do we not have colonies on the moon? Why have we not created stations and things on the moon for us to, like, as a stepping stone to Mars? How come we just stopped? We just, packed it all up and went home, and we haven't been back in 50 years? And this is probably the biggest point that Bart Sibrel like harped on over and over and over in all the interviews, in the book, everything that he put out that I did my research on. This is the first time in history that we've ever gone back in technology. This is the first time where we decided, cool, we went, we're done, let's pack it all up. And here, 50 plus years later, we can't recreate it. We can't do it again. Nobody's done it again. And you have independent people. You have SpaceX working on going to the moon. You have a bunch of other people working on going to the moon. NASA did it. Destroyed all the blueprints, destroyed all the ships, destroyed everything, and was like, cool, we did it, we're done. They, washed their hands of it, and all of a sudden, that's it. It's all over. So it's just weird. It's just too many coincidences stacked on top of each other for everyone to be like, yeah, it's totally cool. We definitely went to the moon. But as patriots, as people that want to believe in our country and want to believe in our government, it's just so much nicer to just believe that we went to the moon, because then you don't have to question, what is our government really up to? If they're going to lie about going to the moon, what else are they willing to lie about? But we won the space race, right? We went to the moon. We did it. So, I don't know. Did we go to the moon or did we not? I guess it's up to you to decide, with all the evidence presented today and all the research you've done on your own, if we actually did it. Anyway, I will see you all next week with another episode of The Rabbit Hole. Until then, my friends, stay weird. If you like the show, please leave us a rating and review wherever you are listening. Follow us on Instagram at rabbit.holepodcast. The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with all research, writing, editing, and producing done by me, Dani Mercy. Special thank you to Zakar Valaha Music.